Back in August of 2016, when I first saw this scene, I saw it a little differently. The graphics weren't as clean, the voice acting wasn't as powerful, let alone as good, and I had no idea that this scene was eventually going to mean something to me.
All I knew was I was playing a game I'd only ever heard of in passing, that the next game in the series was coming out in January, and that fans were excited to play the next adventure of whoever the hell this protagonist was. Honestly, I didn't even know what I was getting into until I was about halfway through the game. Up to that point, I found the gameplay fun but clunky and dated, the voice acting bad aside from Mark Hamill's performance, and the story interesting but not totally engaging. But despite my somewhat negative impression, I kept playing.
The further into the game I got, the more I started to look past the bad localization. I stopped seeing the Americanized product we got and instead started to see the original intention behind the game's developers. I started to see the characters for what they were, and I started to care more and more about the plot. By the time I was halfway through the game, it had all finally started to click with me. While the gameplay was dated, it was still fun in its own way. While the music wasn't great, it was fitting given the context of their use. While the beginning of the game was not all that engaging story or character-wise, I found that giving it a chance was exactly what it needed to shine. And in the end, I found myself loving these characters, and despite its problems, I found the story pretty good as well. My negative impression had turned into a positive one by the time I was done. Just before I started playing this game, I had finally gotten my hands on a PS3. While I initially got it for completely different reasons, playing the sequels became the most important reason for me to have it. Over the next few months, I went on to play almost every game in the series except the second game and the spin-off, Dead Souls. The more of these games I played, the more I fell in love with this series. While I can't say no single game in the series is one of the greatest of all time, the franchise as a whole has become one of the greatest video game franchises I have ever played. The gameplay just kept improving, the characters got better, and the new characters that were introduced I fell in love with as well.
It was then I realized just how niche this franchise was in the West. With the release of Yakuza 0 in January 2017, I made it my duty to try and sell as many people as I could on the series. And I wasn't the only one. I saw tons of fans trying to sell as many people as they could on the franchise, and shockingly, it worked. It worked so well, the sales of the game in the US alone are the reason why we are getting a remake of what is considered the best story in the series. Now, almost a year to the day I gave this weird PS2 game a chance, we have the release of its remake here in the West. And when I decided to do a video on it, I didn't simply want to do another review. Rather, I wanted to keep selling potential new fans on the series. I wanted to show what makes these games so special to those that have played it. I wanted to keep selling people on the Yakuza franchise.
But first, a history lesson. Before the release of Ryu ga Gotoku, known as Yakuza in the West, there was a series that had become a cult classic. The love for this game series even led to the funding of a third game in the franchise after over a decade of nothing. Like Yakuza, it featured a small but sizable world to run around in. Combat consisted of brawler-type battles and QTEs, and the world was filled with many things to interact with and minigames to play, all with a surprisingly high level of detail. That game was Shenmue. Shenmue has been hailed as one of, if not the most influential open-world game of all time due to its attention to detail and its ability to create a living, breathing world filled with things to do. Many have claimed it to be ahead of its time, and Shenmue's influence on open-world games can be seen, but its influence on Ryu ga Gotoku is clearer than any other open-world series. 2 years before the game started development, now Chief Creative Officer for Sega and a member of the Board of Directors for Atlus, Toshihiro Nagoshi, approached acclaimed crime novelist Hasei Seishu with the scenario for the game. Nagoshi, who would become the producer for the game, wanted to, quote, create a powerful, gritty drama where you feel the sense of humanity. He wanted to tell the story of the Yakuza in a way no one had before. Seishu also had a bit of a complicated relationship with gaming when he agreed to join the product. He had been a gamer ever since the original Space Invaders, but at the time he had been losing interest. However, Nagoshi's pitch interested him, and he came on board to write the game and would later go on to write its sequel before leaving the franchise in 2006. The game would follow the man Kazuma Kiryu and took influence from various Japanese Yakuza films. The name Ryuga Gotoku, literally like a dragon, was chosen as Nagoshi felt that dragons gave off a strong image, and he wanted players to feel that same strength. Sega was aiming for the game to be the next Shenmue, as the Shenmue series had entered development hell due to both games being considered massive commercial failures that were unable to make back what they had spent to make them. Shenmue 2 is still, to this day, one of the most expensive games ever created, with a budget of 132 million USD. Comparatively, the original Yakuza was infinitely cheaper at only 2.4 billion yen, which is approximately 21 million USD. A lot was riding on this game, and it all paid off when Ryuga Gotoku released in Japan on December 8, 2005. The game was beloved by Japanese audiences, receiving multiple awards from different Japanese publications, as well as going on to sell 1 million units total. With such a successful game, the next logical step was to bring it overseas. Surely it'd see the same sales success, right? On September 5th, 2006, Yakuza was released in North America, with a European release date 10 days later on September 15th. The game, which aimed to depict a more realistic Japanese culture than what had been seen in big-budget titles at the time, was heavily Americanized. Unnecessary cursing was added in lines that originally featured nothing of the sort, while dialogue as a whole was made cruder. English voice acting replaced the Japanese, with the cast featuring cult-favorite voice actors such as Mark Hamill as Goro Majima. However, the dub was panned for being stilted and awkward, with few having much positive to say outside of Mark Hamill's performance.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh!
The game was no longer about the Japanese Yakuza. It was about Japanese Yakuza acting like modern-day American gangsters. As a result of the poor localization, as well as poor marketing, the sales of the game in the West would go on to make up less than 10% of the total 1 million units sold. But that didn't stop the series in the West. Every numbered Yakuza game was localized and released, with Yakuza 2 releasing in September 2008, Yakuza 3 in March 2010, 4 in March 2011, 5 in December 2015, 0 in January 2017, and soon Yakuza 6 The Song of Life in 2018. We even got the spin-off Yakuza Dead Souls or Ryuga Gotoku of the End in 2012. However, these games all released years after their original release in Japan, with Yakuza 5 and 0 only making it over with help from Sony, the former of which was digital only. Dead Souls is also the only spin-off to leave Japan, with games like Kenzan, Kurohyou 1 and 2, Ishin, and the remasters of the first two games never leaving the island nation. The story of Yakuza in the West has never been very happy. None of the games have sold that well, and the localizations were always plagued with issues such as cut content and attempt to make the games gel better with Americans. Things got so bad it seemed as though Sega of America was done trying to sell it. That's when, in 2015, the series got a second chance thanks to Sony and what they called The List. This list aimed to gain goodwill with gamers by fulfilling their wishes. One of these wishes was a localization of Yakuza 5, which had been out in Japan for 3 years. Sony decided to one-up fans' hopes by helping localize not only 5, but 0 as well. The former was released a few days after its announcement, but it didn't cause many waves. While sales numbers haven't been released, it's unlikely the game made much money. Sadly, the Yakuza series continued to flounder. Now is the time I talk about what is arguably the second most important game in the franchise's history, which is only surpassed by the original game's release. After 2 years, Yakuza 0 was finally released in the West on January 24th to rave reviews and would dominate the online video game conversation in the first few months of 2017. a year debated by many to possibly be one of the best years in video game history, with some of the greatest games of all time releasing bi-weekly. In the first week alone, Yakuza 0 sold an estimated 108,000 units in Western territories, all while going up against the 7th entry in the industry giant Resident Evil. It was with the 7th release in the West the franchise finally broke out of its slump. Popularity has never been bigger, and with new entries such as Kiwami, a remake of the original game in the same engine as 0, and Yakuza 6 just on the horizon, its popularity is unlikely to die out anytime soon.
At the time of writing this video, it's been about a month since Kiwami came out, and I don't expect this to be out anytime soon. With school and everything, it's just not a priority. The majority of sales this game is going to get have already been made, but that's not the point. The point of this video is to sell you on the Yakuza franchise using Kiwami. It just so happens the majority of footage I have shown or will be showing you is from Kiwami, but I will be talking about the franchise as a whole. Before I really get into it, I just want to go off the cuff and talk about this real quick. Yakuza Kiwami, the only edition of it is a Steelbook edition. And it's a very nice steelbook, but I know a lot of people, myself included, don't like steelbooks, mainly for the spine. This is a very nice steelbook, and it's covered in just incredibly colorful art that just really, really makes me love it, despite its ugly spine. Plus, if you don't like the spine, it does come with a plastic sheath for it, or whatever the hell this is called, that you can put it in that makes it somewhat better. But if you don't like steelbooks, don't let this break it for you. Don't, because this game is way, way worth using a steelbook or getting a steelbook for. Now for the summary portion where I actually talk about gameplay, character, story, etc. And to start things off, I want to talk about the location in which the Yakuza series takes place, usually. And that is Kamurocho, Tokyo.
The third best-selling Sega franchise is often considered by people unfamiliar to it to be the Grand Theft Auto of the East, and it's easy to see why they would think this. Both delve into the seedy underworld of their respective countries and have you playing as criminals. However, that's where the similarities between the two end. GTA is known for its sprawling open world where you can steal vehicles, commit all kinds of crimes at your leisure, and anything you can get your hands on is better than hand-to-hand combat. Yakuza, on the other hand, features none of that. While you do run around what is arguably an open world, it's much smaller than any GTA game. The district of Kamurocho is just that, a district. It's so small I would argue that open world isn't the best descriptor for it. Rather, I would describe it as a sandbox. A smaller, more detailed area for you to run around in, with things to do around every corner rather than on the other side of the map. Think of it like the difference between Breath of the Wild and any world in Mario 64. What makes Kamurocho so much more interesting and memorable than a single area in GTA of the same size is that Kamurocho is expertly designed and filled with interesting things for you to do. Playing dozens of minigames, fighting random strangers in the street, getting drunk at one of the many restaurants and bars, and completing substories are all things you can spend hours doing in between story objectives. Every game takes place within the streets of Kamurocho, which throughout the series remains relatively the same. This doesn't mean you'll be playing the exact same area every game, however. Each game does something that makes returning to Kamurocho time and time again feel more like returning to your hometown. Usually alongside Kamurocho Tokyo, you'll be able to visit new areas such as Sotenbori Osaka, a coastal town in Okinawa, Nagasukai Fukuoka, Tsukimino Sapporo, and Kaneicho Nagoya. Even in games such as Yakuza 4 that don't feature any new maps to visit, Kamurocho is explorable in a way that makes it feel brand new. For instance, Yakuza 4 allows you to traverse the rooftops of the district as well as the underground, while Yakuza 0 adds various alleyways and back streets that would later get paved over and turned into buildings in later games. Another fantastic aspect of Yakuza is the ability to make Kamurocho feel alive. The Kabukicho-inspired district feels alive in every game, filled with people going from place to place or standing around and chatting. While a more subtle aspect of the series, it's one that deserves the praise it does get. The gameplay throughout the series can be summed up as a 90s arcade beat-em-up but brought into 3D. The beat-em-up genre never had the easiest time translating into 3D. The only times it's been truly successful is when it goes the Dynasty Warriors route of overly simplifying combat and turning each encounter into less than mindless button mashing, or it goes the character action route by taking influence from fighting games and putting great emphasis on combos, arguably becoming a genre all its own. Yakuza is one of the few series that's been able to bring combat systems found in games like Double Dragon and Final Fight into 3D without losing or replacing anything. Combat mainly consists of two action buttons, one for punches and one for kicks, a dodge button, a guard button, a lock-on button, and a grab button. Depending on the game, there will be different additions such as a button to change combat styles. While there are combos, they're nowhere near as emphasized as games like Devil May Cry. Instead, Yakuza emphasizes heat actions. As you land successful hits, a meter next to your health slowly rises. This is your heat meter, and it allows you to unleash devastatingly brutal and badass attacks. Once the initial bar is filled, you are able to hit triangle when certain conditions are met that allow you to do various heat actions. Conditions range from simply grabbing an enemy and bringing them next to a wall, to being locked onto an enemy while a certain distance away. Yakuza 0, Kiwami, as well as the unlocalized Ishin also feature a style system not in other games. This system allows you to switch combat styles mid-fight, making battles more dynamic as you switch from one style to another to fit the current situation. While there are also weapons you can use, I've never been the biggest fan of them as they can actually limit what attacks you have available. However, certain weapons can be great for crowd control and are perfect for taking down difficult enemies. Plus, every weapon's heat action is enjoyable to watch. If at any point while you're playing you get tired of the hyper-serious main story, there are tons of things for you to do in the streets. You can get into random street fights, bowl, go to batting cages, complete hilarious sub-stories, and best of all, sing karaoke. Unlike GTA, you can't go up to anyone on the street you want and just kill them. Enemies will spawn alongside harmless citizens and will chase you shortly after they see you. This is actually one of Yakuza's more annoying points, as you can end up in unwanted fights you're unable to escape from. One of the best things about Yakuza Ishin was that it added a sprint button, helping prevent these fights in the first place. Another thing you can find throughout Kamurocho are various sub-stories. Sub-stories act as Yakuza's version of side quests. In them, you do various things that range from simply fighting someone to hunting a person down, or even simply bringing someone a specific item. You'll usually be rewarded with health items, money, or even equipment. Sub-stories often act as the game's comic relief. They help balance out the dark and serious tone of the main plot, allowing you to feel emotions from all over the spectrum. The best example I can give for how insane these sub-stories can get is in Yakuza 0, when you literally train a dominatrix in how to be a successful mistress. If you're ever in need of a laugh, just roam around the streets and alleys and you'll find something good. Yakuza also boasts a buffet of minigames that are all uniquely fun in their own right. Whether it's the previously mentioned bowling, immensely fun karaoke, slot car racing, or entire real-life Sega arcade games, you always get a large amount of extras that will distract you from the main story for hours on end. Yakuza is the definition of bang for your buck. However, none of these distractions are meant to overshadow the main draw of every Yakuza game: the plot. Because the series' roots are firmly placed in that of film, the games tend to be hyper-story focused, with cutscenes that go on for long stretches of time. Depending on who you are, you may not like this. However, if you're one who has come to love the story focus of games like Metal Gear, then Yakuza will perfectly gel with you. These stories are all serious crime thrillers with many twists and turns, with characters you'll come to love and others you'll come to hate. In each game, you play as Kazuma Kiryu, the Dragon of Dojima. Technically an ex-Yakuza in every game, he keeps getting dragged back in for one reason or another, but he always comes out on top somehow. Kazuma is the epitome of an idealized noble Japanese protagonist. Stoic, brave, and determined, you can find pieces of him in tons of protagonists in Japanese media. While he may be a criminal, he's a good guy who only does crimes to those who deserve it. The big reason why you can't just get into fights whenever you want is because Kiryu isn't the type of person to do that. You never see him attack innocent civilians. The closest you ever see is when he's debt collecting in the beginning of Yakuza 0 and Kiwami, and that's only because he was ordered to. Of his own will, he'd never do things like that. While this description of him may not be to your liking if you're the type of person to hate characters like this, Kiryu is something special. Unlike a lot of protagonists like this, Kiryu isn't an idiot. He knows when fighting is inevitable, and he doesn't go around spewing out cheesy speeches about friendship and happiness. Rather, he's more of a strong, silent type. While he does hold these ideals, he knows when they can and can't be pushed. He feels like a legitimate person as a result, and it makes him all the more likable. Speaking of him being likable, Kazuma Kiryu is also 100% badass. As you play through the games, one theme you'll come to find is in every single one is that of family and brotherhood. It starts off simply as the different branches found in Tojo Clan's families, but it eventually becomes something much more. Every game deals with family in its own unique way, whether it be Kiryu's blood brother and childhood friend Nishiki turning on him in Kiwami, a man placed in jail for a murder breaking out after finding out his blood brother is reported dead in Yakuza 5, or even an Okinawan Yakuza boss connecting with his adoptive daughter in Yakuza 3. However, the biggest and best example of family throughout the series is that of Kazuma Kiryu's adoptive daughter Haruka. Present in every game in the main series, minus Yakuza 0, which takes place years before she's even a sperm, Haruka varies in importance depending on the plot. For example, in Yakuza 4, she's barely important at all, while in Yakuza 5, she's important enough to be a playable character. Despite this, Haruka remains as the constant reminder of what is most important in Kiryu's life, and why he's doing everything he is. One of the best examples of the connection between these two is when you take Haruka to karaoke. You can tell just how much Kiryu cares about Haruka as he cheers her on while she sings.
高鳴る胸は乙女色。今やっと気づきました。もうどうしようもなく、きっと多分俺は。おいおいおいおい。遥が好きだぜ。
Throughout the entire series, you see this girl grow up from a young 8-year-old lost and looking for her mother she never knew, to an accomplished 19-year-old adult. As you play the games, you start to care for her as a daughter as well, helping strengthen the connection between the player and Kiryu as a result. By the time you get to play as her in the 5th game, she has gone through so many hardships only to come out on top, you can't help but feel proud when she succeeds and angry when she's hurt. Haruka remains one of the series' best characters because of this connection it's able to create.
Throughout the series, there are many characters that return time and time again that you end up becoming attached to, but I can't go over every single one of them or else this video would be way too long. But there is one main character I can't not go over. And if you know anything at all about the series or have seen anything, it's probably the character you've heard the most about.
Now, who is this character that has apparently supplanted Kiryu as the face of the franchise? Who is this magnificent beauty that can be found around every corner? Who is this man you've seen throughout the entire video in different situations and different outfits? Well, person I don't know, that man is Goro Majima. This man is utterly fucking insane and has been voted the fan favorite character in Japan and is just as well beloved by fans in the West. Everything from his voice to how he moves all exist to set the tone for his character. He is someone to be feared, laughed at, hated, loved, trusted, yet unpredictable. His role throughout the series changes with each installment, and he steals the show every time he's around and is allowed to do his thing. I don't even have to explain what his thing is. You can just tell by watching the footage I'm showing you. Kiwami even gives him an entire system that makes him appear everywhere. The only sad thing about Majima is that his importance vary game by game. It seems as though as the number at the end of each game gets bigger, the less important he gets, with him being most important in Yakuza 0. By Yakuza 5, he's nothing more than a plot point and motivation for another character. The only exceptions exist in 2 games. The first exception is the original game of the series. I personally feel like he's almost tacked on and completely unrelated to the plot. He'll show up, steal the show, then run off, with the scene having little effect on the rest of the plot. However, Kiwami does give Majima infinitely more to do with the Majima Everywhere system. It helps him get more screen time while not messing up the original plot. The other exception is a game still in production, Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is a remake of the second game in the series. In this game, Majima is made playable once again and is given his own story that connects back to the events of Yakuza 0. This, in my opinion, makes him more important than he already was in Yakuza 2. Despite Majima's fall in importance, recent entries in the series have been making him more important again, and it's great to see this selective madman play an important role in the newer games.
Hey guys, so before I really get into it, sorry my voice sounds weird, I'm sick, I may have strep throat, I don't know, all I know is it hurts a lot, so I'm gonna keep this brief, but I'm currently editing the video, that was great, I'm editing the video, I just need to include this part as well as this next little section. Basically, when I first started working on this video, one idea I had was a second opinion section where I get my friends to chime in and speak their piece and sell you on Yakuza. But after a while, I didn't want to include it because it was making the video too long. But one of my friends he convinced me. So he made a video, it's about 5 minutes long, and that took a little while. But overall, the video is still pretty long, so I could understand if you might not want to watch it, or if you're already sold or whatever. But just in case, go to this timestamp if you just want to skip it. I'd recommend not, because this video is actually really good. But this video is getting long. But, yeah. Sorry it took so long. And I hope you're enjoying the video. I'm gonna go not talk. Also, I'm including the link to his channel in the title card thing. That's fucking right here. I don't know. I don't want to talk right now. Just go to his channel. His channel's good.
Hey there, so I'm the friend that got to Yakuza, and I just want to take this opportunity to talk about why I personally fell for the Yakuza series. It all started when I was a wee lad, and my friend said, "Hey Will, you know what game you might like?" I said, "What is it, my sweet dear friend?" And he was all, "It's Yakuza 3, I think it's a game you'll really love." And I never played it, so that's not why I got into Yakuza. So then, I went to his house one day, like a year ago or something like that, and he was playing Yakuza 3 on the PS3 that I gave him, and all I remember seeing was him fighting like a dude who kept sidestepping ridiculously, and he was switching back and forth around him like whoosh whoosh, and it was really goofy and funny to watch. So I threw away my previous ideas of it being a serious, monotonous series about boring crime bosses and drama, and admitted there might be more to this game than what I had previously assumed, and I wanted to try it out. Then, I remember seeing the scene where Kiryu and Riki had tried to find a fat guy in a love hotel, and the only way they could get in was by pretending to be gay, and when I saw that scene for the first time, then I think I turned a little gay right then and there, and told myself, well, I have to get this game now and see exactly what it's like. A decent bit after that, Yakuza 0 released for the PS4, and that was Sega's big chance to see what Western audiences thought about the Yakuza series. I bought Yakuza 0 on release date, and the first thing that I noticed when playing it immediately was that the combat was the most satisfying thing ever. The punches felt hard, the moves were super over the top, the music was astounding and energetic. I remember my jaw just dropping the moment I first knocked someone out with a punch. They flew backwards in slow motion, and I just shouted, "Holy shit!" really loud. At that point, I was sold and went on to binge the hell out of the game, to the point where even told me, "Damn, dude, you sliced through this game." I just couldn't find myself putting the controller down no matter what I did. I had to keep playing. Yakuza 0 was the only title in recent years that really felt like a classic game. Not classic so far as back to 8-bit side-scrollers, but maybe around PS1 or PS2 era games. The game felt like what AAA games should be, improving on what made games so great back in the day and adding new things in with the newer, more capable hardware that developers now had access to. Not microtransactions and DLC. Did I mention this game has free DLC? Because it does. The gameplay was goofy and funny in a lot of ways, especially with the submissions. Not only that, but everything was so fleshed out. There was so much effort put into every little thing that it started to feel like Witcher 3 depths of detail. And once you put the goofiness of the gameplay and side stories aside, you get back to the main story, and oh my god, the main story is actually really fucking good. The story was heart-wrenching and sad to the point where I've cried once or twice. The drama it pulls off is incredible. It would go from that to maybe a scene with Kiryu where he does something like, and you'd be like, oh, he's about to do it! He's about to put him in their place, boys! Shoot, let's go! And then you get all hyped from it, and you go straight into the gameplay right after that, and then you could beat the absolute stuffing out of someone that was either being an asshole or someone that Kiryu was talking about beating the stuffing out of, or whomstever the hell. I also think that might be a lot of where Yakuza gets its appeal from. For me, it was seeing a warrior of justice put all these tough guy punks in their place after they were acting like a jerk to you or someone else. In real life, we may all have an interaction with someone who was a jerk to you, and you couldn't do anything about it, except wish that you could. Me personally, whenever I experience an unpleasant person, I kind of sit there and get upset that people have this illusion of power that they think they can just stomp over other people. That there are these people out there who are too self-centered to think about anyone other than themselves. And there's an awful lot of people like that out there. In Yakuza, people do the same thing. Only now, you can beat the living shit out of them. That's right. Apologize. It feels awesome. Yakuza takes that human need for power and puts it in the shoes of the toughest motherfucker in Japan. Not only that, but I personally am a real goody two-shoes myself, so seeing how kind of helpful Kiryu is to other people and how he puts terrible people in their place is just really, really refreshing. Put that on top of a really well-composed and fitting soundtrack with hilarious gameplay and side plots, and top it off with a tear-jerking, awesomely written narrative, and you have a very powerful game. This game combines the human desire for power, a funny comedy, and sad and thrilling narrative, and a fully functioning gameplay system all into one Blu-ray disc. The length is pretty good, all things considered. There's a New Game Plus system, a premium adventure mode where you can just go around doing whatever you want with tons of mini-games, characters you could interact with, events you could participate in that enrich the story or the characters, etc. Yakuza 0 and its other predecessors has so much jam-packed content in them that it's pretty hard to dislike the games. Sure, they have their flaws, I mean, what game is perfect? But this gem of a series has a lot more to love than it has to dislike. I managed to get a coworker of mine into the series as well, through gameplay, and he went and bought Yakuza 0 and Kiwami. And I hope that we can get more people into the series. Like Maka said, the game's success really just hinges on people giving it the chance it deserves. And this is why I personally love Yakuza, or Ryuga Gotoku, whichever you prefer.
Now, if I have successfully sold you on the Yakuza series, you might be wondering, where do I start?
Well, before I get to that, let me just say that Yakuza is a PlayStation franchise. Every game in the series has been home to PlayStation consoles, with the only exception being an HD remaster of Yakuza 1 and 2 to the Wii U. And even then, that collection had been on the PS3 for years by that point. The point here is if you don't have any PlayStation systems, you're shit out of luck.
Where to start? That's the big question right now. But don't worry, I'm here to tell you that the recently released Yakuza Kiwami is the best place to start. Not only that, but it's not the best place to start. Let me explain.
Yakuza Kiwami is a fantastic starting point, don't get me wrong. Not only is it at most $30, giving you little excuse to try it out, but it's also a remake of the first game in the series. You don't need to know the plot of past games because this was the first plot. But that's kind of the problem. It's a remake of the first game in the series. The reason so many people love Yakuza is for its story, but the story of Yakuza 1 isn't great. It's good and finishes really strong, but as a whole, it's very middle of the road when compared to stories in other games. Unlike later games which take more influence from various types of anime such as shonen, Yakuza 1 is based heavily on Yakuza films. As a result, however, the plot feels like half the time it's trying to be its own unique story, while the other half feels like it's trying to pay homage to the stories it's inspired by. The plot wanders in the middle, with story arcs that are great for developing the main characters, but terrible for plot progression. they don't feel like they're needed and they come off more as reference to things that inspired it. Not only that, but compared to later games, the pacing of these scenes are very quick. While later games have longer cutscenes with good pacing to match, Yakuza 1 has shorter cutscenes with the pacing moving twice as fast as later ones. As a remake, Kiwami keeps this pacing, as its main goal isn't to redo the story, but to simply bring it into the modern day. Outside of the story, the game doesn't really add anything gameplay-wise. The closest thing is the Majima Everywhere system, but it doesn't really do much for the gameplay outside of giving Majima more screen time.
Everything that can be found in Kiwami can also be found in Yakuza 0. I think this game is the best place to start, as not only does it have everything Kiwami does, but it also has more to do, a better story, and it has Majima at his most important, where he continues to steal the spotlight. Not only that, but I think the biggest reason this game is a great starting point is that it makes the plot of Yakuza 1 better. The biggest issue with Yakuza 1 is that the plot rests entirely on the relationship between Kiryu and his blood brother Nishiki. And the problem with this is that Yakuza 1, on PS2 at least, doesn't do enough to make you care about this relationship. But with 0 being a prequel, it's able to retroactively fix it. And combined with the efforts by Yakuza Kiwami to fix the same issue, it turns one of the more okay villains in the series into one of the best. So that's why I would say Yakuza 0 is the best starting point in the series. But if you don't have the money, Kiwami is still a great, cheaper alternative, as Kiwami, despite being the more recent release, is only $30, while 0 is hovering around $50 at this moment still. However, no matter where you start, I'm sure you will fall in love with this franchise if you like Japanese storytelling at all, and you'll wish you'd gotten into it sooner. And that is my attempt to sell you on the Yakuza franchise.